He stood silently at the edge of the construction site, dust clinging to his faded clothes, boots scuffed from years of hard work. The machines roared around him, workers shouting over the hum of progress, yet he remained still, a solitary figure framed by the golden, cinematic light of the late afternoon. To the others, he was just another laborer, blending into the daily grind. But he carried a story they couldn't see. Once, he had walked away from a life that promised wealth and comfort, corporate offices, polished shoes, endless meetings, but had left him hollow. Here, amidst steel beams and concrete, he found something more valuable: purpose. Every nail he hammered, every brick he set, was a quiet rebellion against a world that measured worth by titles and bank accounts. He worked not for applause, but for the satisfaction of building something real, something that would endure. As the sun dipped behind the half-finished skyline, casting long shadows across the site, he took a deep breath. Dust on his skin, sweat on his brow, heart steady, he knew this work mattered. Not for recognition, not for reward, but for the quiet strength it gave him, standing firm in the world. The sun beat down on the construction site, dust swirling in the dry air. In the background, a group of workers laughed and joked, their voices carrying over the clang of metal and hum of machinery. They didn't notice him, or maybe they chose not to. He worked alone, his hands rough and calloused, sweat streaking the grime on his face. Every movement was deliberate, precise, like he was trying to prove something only he could understand. The laughter behind him stung, but he didn't flinch. He had learned long ago that recognition was fleeting, and sometimes the only validation worth having came from oneself. Years ago, he had been told he wouldn't make it, that the world wasn't built for someone like him to rise above circumstances. Yet here he was, brick by brick, beam by beam, creating something tangible while others wasted energy mocking. As the day waned, the sunlight softened, casting golden highlights across his sweat-soaked clothes. The laughter faded in the distance, leaving only the rhythmic sound of his labor. Alone, yes, but in that solitude, he felt a quiet pride, a strength no mockery could diminish. He was building more than a structure, he was building his story. Echoed across the construction site as the afternoon sun beat down mercilessly. Workers shouted, rushing to secure materials, but no one noticed the crane teetering dangerously above. In a heartbeat, a heavy beam slipped, hurtling toward a young worker engrossed in his task. Time seemed to stretch. Dust filled the air, and a sharp wind carried the roar of falling metal. Without thinking, a man in dusty clothes lunged forward, grabbing the worker's arm and yanking him out of harm's way. The beam crashed to the ground, sending a cloud of dust and sparks into the air. Silence followed, broken only by heavy breathing and the distant hum of machinery. The rescued worker stared at him, eyes wide, the weight of what had just happened sinking in. You saved me," he whispered, voice trembling. The man just shook his head, dust falling from his shoulders. "We look out for each other," he said quietly, his eyes returning to the site as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Around them, the other workers finally caught up, or replacing their earlier chatter. But he didn't seek recognition. In that moment, bravery wasn't about applause, it was about standing firm when lives hung in the balance. The construction site buzzed with activity, dust and sweat coating every surface. Workers moved quickly, shouting instructions, while one man stood apart, quietly handling his tasks. He was competent, sure, but ordinary, or so everyone thought. When the foreman called for a break, he leaned against a steel beam and slowly lifted his helmet. A collective murmur ran through the crew as the sun caught his face, sharp jawline, piercing eyes, a presence that demanded attention. Whispers spread like wildfire, "Wait, that's him." The man's gaze swept across the stunned workers. Confidence radiated from every movement as he casually wiped the sweat from his brow. He didn't need to speak, the silence said it all. This was someone who had walked in unnoticed, blending in with the crowd, only to reveal a force no one had expected. Memories flickered in the minds of his co-workers, moments they'd underestimated him, brushed him off, or joked behind his back. Now, seeing him there, calm and assured, they realized how wrong they'd been. He smiled faintly, then turned back to the task at hand, helmet in hand. The lesson was clear: strength and leadership often arrive quietly, waiting for the perfect moment to make themselves known. And when they do, they leave a lasting mark. He moved silently through the gleaming corporate office, mop in hand, dust clinging to the edges of his worn uniform. The hum of fluorescent lights echoed above, punctuated by the chatter of executives who never looked up from their screens. To them, he was invisible, a janitor, a background fixture. They ignored him. But he didn't mind. He had a purpose that no suit or title could convey. Each sweep, each polish, was a calculated step in a plan only he understood. The building hummed around him, walls lined with glass and steel, yet he felt entirely in control. Every unnoticed corner he cleaned, every discarded paper he picked up, was part of a rhythm he alone dictated. Moments later, he paused, looking out over the city skyline from the floor-to-ceiling windows. Dramatic light streamed across his face, highlighting determination etched into every line. "They ignored me," he whispered, almost to himself, but there was no bitterness, only focus. By the time the executives realized something was amiss, he had already achieved what no one expected. Quiet, unassuming, overlooked, he had orchestrated change from the shadows, proving that true power often comes dressed in plain clothes, working silently while the world looks the other way. The office was buzzing with the usual chaos. Papers flew, phones rang, and employees rushed from desk to desk. Then he arrived. A simple delivery driver, carrying a plain cardboard box, dressed in a faded uniform. Nobody paid much attention, except to roll their eyes as he accidentally bumped into a few desks. "Watch it, rookie," muttered a coworker. He smiled politely and moved on, silent and unassuming. Hours passed. The box was delivered, and the driver started to leave, but the office manager called him back. As he opened the package, everyone leaned over curiously. Inside were critical documents that could have delayed the company's biggest deal of the year. Without hesitation, he corrected a misfiled folder, rearranged the paperwork, and saved the day. Everyone froze. Then the driver removed his cap, revealing his face clearly to the stunned staff. Whispers spread like wildfire: this wasn't just any driver. He was Jonathan Ellis, heir to the company, and the very man they had doubted for weeks. He smiled, shrugged, and said quietly, "Sometimes you need to walk in someone else's shoes to truly understand their world." From that day on, nobody ever underestimated anyone, at least not without thinking twice. The kitchen buzzed with activity, steam rising from pots, knives clattering on cutting boards, and the hum of refrigerators in the background. Suddenly, the lights flickered, then went out entirely. Panic rippled through the cafeteria staff, orders were pending, ovens were hot, and the power outage threatened to ruin everything. Amid the chaos, she stepped forward. A cafeteria worker, usually overlooked while bustling behind counters and trays, moved confidently toward the electrical panel. Her co-workers watched in disbelief, mouths open, as she knelt beside the complicated tangle of wires. Minutes stretched like hours. Sparks flew, and the hum of machines returned one by one under her steady hands. The dramatic light from the flickering emergency bulbs cast her face in sharp relief, highlighting determination and focus that no uniform could conceal. Finally, with a quiet click, the power surged back. Lights flickered on, ovens roared, and refrigeration hummed steadily. The kitchen erupted in applause and astonished murmurs. She simply smiled, wiping her hands on her apron, shrugging as if it had been the easiest thing in the world. "Just doing my job," she said softly. In that moment, it was clear: true heroes don't wear capes. Sometimes, they wear aprons, face danger calmly, and save everything when no one expects them to. The construction site was chaotic. Machines roared, dust filled the air, and workers shouted over the clanging of metal. Among them, a young man in a yellow helmet moved quietly, carrying bricks and sweeping dust, blending in with everyone else. No one paid him much attention, just another laborer. He kept his head down, focused, unnoticed. That is, until the moment the crane wobbled. A young apprentice, new to the site, stepped too close to the edge. Time slowed. The beam above teetered. Workers screamed, frozen in panic. Without hesitation, the young man lunged forward, catching the apprentice just in time. Dust and debris rained around them. Hearts pounded. The workers stared, jaws dropped. As the dust settled, someone shouted, "Who are you?" He smiled, brushing dirt off his clothes. Just someone who knows what it's like to be underestimated. Later, the truth emerged, he wasn't just a laborer. He was the son of the construction company owner, working undercover to understand his employees. But it wasn't his title that mattered, it was the courage and quick thinking that earned him respect that day. From that moment on, everyone learned a lesson: true heroes aren't defined by their clothes, but by their actions. He sat on the corner every day, a worn blanket draped over his shoulders, a faded cardboard sign resting on his knees, "Be kind." People hurried past, their eyes glued to phones or the busy streets. Some sneered, others whispered. Most ignored him entirely. Yet he never complained. He smiled faintly, nodding at the rare passerby who offered a glance, or a coin. One rainy afternoon, a young woman rushed down the street, late for an important meeting. She tripped over the uneven pavement, her coffee spilling everywhere. In a flash, the homeless man reached out, steadying her just in time. She looked up, stunned. I didn't expect anyone to care," she stammered. He shrugged softly, eyes kind. Sometimes people forget the small things matter. Later that week, the woman returned, but not with coffee or coins. She had a job opportunity for him. It turned out, he wasn't just any man on the street, he had been a skilled engineer, down on his luck. That corner, once a place of judgment and mockery, became a lesson for the city: never judge someone by what they wear or where they sleep. True worth is often hidden. From that day on, everyone remembered the man with the sign, the one who taught kindness by living it. The office buzzed with tension. Employees hurried between meetings, phones rang incessantly, and papers were stacked high. Among them, a young intern in plain clothes carried boxes from one corner to another, unnoticed and underestimated. "Who's the new kid?" one coworker whispered, smirking. "Looks like he can't even carry these properly." He smiled politely, keeping his head down. Every dropped file, every misplaced envelope, was met with quiet ridicule. Yet he didn't complain, he had a plan. Days passed, and the intern kept working silently, observing the chaos, learning everyone's habits, and noting critical inefficiencies. He saw mistakes no one else noticed, problems the management had overlooked for months. Then came the day of the big client meeting. The office was in a frenzy, documents missing, presentations incomplete, deadlines looming. The intern stepped forward. Calm, precise, and confident, he organized files, corrected errors, and even improved the slides. The clients arrived to a seamless presentation, impressed by the professionalism. Only then did he reveal the truth: he was not just an intern. He was the CEO's son, working undercover to understand the office from the ground up. Suddenly, the same co-workers who mocked him stared in awe. Respect wasn't demanded, it was earned through skill, patience, and courage. The office was quiet for once, too quiet. Monitors glowed, keyboards clicked, and the hum of machines filled the room. Everyone thought it was just another normal night shift. The security guard, a tall, quiet man in a standard uniform, patrolled the hallways as usual. Most employees ignored him. He never spoke much, and they assumed he was just there for the cameras and doors. Then the alert sounded. A hacker had infiltrated the company's secure system, and critical data was at risk. Panic spread instantly. IT staff scrambled, but the hacker moved faster than anyone could keep up. Without hesitation, the security guard stepped forward. His hands flew across the keyboard with precision, tracing the intruder's steps, locking files, and shutting down the attack before any data was stolen. Everyone watched in stunned silence. "Wait, how did you?" someone whispered. He looked up calmly, a small smile on his face. "Sometimes security isn't just about doors and badges," he said. "It's about knowing the system." Later, the truth came out, he wasn't just a guard. He was a former cybersecurity expert, hired in secret to protect the company from hidden threats. From that night on, everyone learned a valuable lesson: never underestimate quiet strength. True power often hides in plain sight. She had been walking the hospital halls for years, mop in hand, unnoticed and underestimated. Doctors rushed past her, nurses barely gave a glance, and patients rarely remembered her name. She was just the cleaner, invisible among the chaos of life and medicine. Until one night. The ICU was quiet, monitors beeping softly. A critical patient's vitals began to drop, unnoticed by the exhausted staff. She stopped mid-step, eyes narrowing at the rhythm on the monitor. Something was wrong. Without hesitation, she rushed to the console and tapped a few keys. "You're missing the warning signs," she said calmly. The doctors froze. "What do you mean?" asked the attending physician, disbelief in his voice. She pointed at the screen, explaining exactly what was wrong: symptoms, readings, and the subtle signs of impending cardiac failure. The staff followed her instructions, adjusted treatment, and saved the patient just in time. Silence filled the room. Shocked, they stared at the quiet woman they had overlooked for years. Later, the hospital learned her secret: she was a trained surgeon who had left her practice behind but never her knowledge. From that day on, she wasn't just the cleaner, they called her the lifesaver in scrubs, proving that talent and wisdom can come from the most unexpected places. It was a busy Friday night in the city. Neon lights reflected off wet streets, and taxi cabs honked impatiently as passengers rushed to their destinations. One cab pulled up, and a young couple jumped in, exhausted and annoyed. The driver was quiet, wearing a simple jacket and cap. He didn't speak much, and the couple assumed he was just another ordinary driver. They complained about the traffic, the music, even the fare, treating him as invisible. Halfway through the ride, the car slowed at a red light. Suddenly, the driver's calm voice cut through their chatter. "You know, I've seen situations like yours before," he said, glancing at them in the rearview mirror. "It reminds me of a case I handled not long ago." The couple laughed nervously. "Oh yeah? What case?" He smiled, pulling out his wallet. A badge gleamed under the city lights. "I'm Judge Ellis. That case involved someone who acted just like you, disrespectful, rushed, and unaware of consequences." Shock froze them. The cab was no longer just a ride, it was a lesson. By the time they reached their destination, they had learned something far more valuable than directions: never judge, never mock, and always respect the people around you, because you never know who holds power. The warehouse was noisy, forklifts roaring, boxes sliding, and employees shouting over the chaos. Among them, a young man struggled to lift heavy crates, moving slower than everyone else. Coworkers muttered, rolled their eyes, and whispered, "Why is he so slow?" He didn't respond. He kept going, sweat dripping from his brow, carefully stacking boxes the way he thought best. Every step was measured, deliberate, and painfully slow to those watching. Then came the emergency. A stack of fragile packages teetered, ready to collapse on the floor, and worse, on a coworker standing below. Panic erupted. People shouted, frozen in place, unsure what to do. Without hesitation, the slow worker sprinted forward, steadying the stack and lifting the crates just in time to prevent disaster. The packages remained intact, and no one was hurt. Everyone stared, mouths open. The very same man they had mocked had saved the day. Later, the warehouse manager revealed the truth: he wasn't just another employee. He was a logistics expert brought in to test the team's efficiency and focus. From that day on, speed no longer defined value. Patience, skill, and awareness earned respect, and the slowest worker became the most admired. Everyone in town assumed he was just an old farmer. Straw hat tilted low, weathered hands gripping the fence, standing quietly as cars passed by his worn farmhouse. People whispered, laughed, and joked about him. Still milking cows at his age, they scoffed. Probably owns nothing but that tiny farm, they chuckled. He never responded. He simply nodded, tending to his land with calm patience. Then came the announcement. The city council planned to buy land for a massive commercial project. Developers and investors crowded the area, eager to negotiate. They assumed the farmer would sell. He was just an old man, after all. But when the meeting began, he revealed the truth. "I own every square foot of this neighborhood," he said, voice steady, eyes bright. "Every property, every street, every plot. This land has been in my family for generations. And I decide what happens here." The room went silent. Developers stared, jaws dropping. They had underestimated him completely. From that day on, the farmer wasn't just a man in a straw hat. He became a legend. A reminder that appearances are often deceiving, and true power is not always obvious. The classroom buzzed with restless energy. Students whispered, passed notes, and doodled in their notebooks. Today's substitute teacher was a young woman, dressed plainly, carrying a stack of papers. Most of the students assumed she was inexperienced. Another boring day ahead. "Great, another boring sub," one student muttered. She smiled faintly and began writing on the blackboard. At first, the lesson seemed simple, almost too basic. Students snickered, rolled their eyes, and ignored her instructions. But then she paused, and her tone changed. She asked questions that challenged their thinking, connecting the material to real-world problems. Her explanations were sharp, insightful, and filled with examples the students had never considered. One student raised his hand nervously. "Wait, how do you know all this?" She turned, calm and confident. "Because I teach this every day, not as a sub, but as the curriculum designer for this entire school district." Shock rippled through the room. The same students who had dismissed her minutes ago now sat upright, hanging on every word. From that day on, they learned an important lesson: never underestimate someone based on appearance, title, or first impressions. True knowledge often comes from unexpected places. The classroom buzzed with restless energy. Students whispered, passed notes, and doodled in their notebooks. Today's substitute teacher was a young woman, dressed plainly, carrying a stack of papers. Most of the students assumed she was inexperienced. Another boring day ahead. "Great, another boring sub," one student muttered. She smiled faintly and began writing on the blackboard. At first, the lesson seemed simple, almost too basic. Students snickered, rolled their eyes, and ignored her instructions. But then she paused, and her tone changed. She asked questions that challenged their thinking, connecting the material to real-world problems. Her explanations were sharp, insightful, and filled with examples the students had never considered. One student raised his hand nervously. "Wait, how do you know all this?" She turned, calm and confident. "Because I teach this every day, not as a sub, but as the curriculum designer for this entire school district." Shock rippled through the room. The same students who had dismissed her minutes ago now sat upright, hanging on every word. From that day on, they learned an important lesson: never underestimate someone based on appearance, title, or first impressions. True knowledge often comes from unexpected places. The kitchen was alive with chaos. Pots clanged, orders flew out, and the staff shouted over the heat. Among them, a quiet dishwasher worked diligently, stacking plates and scrubbing pans without complaint. Most of the chefs barely noticed him, or if they did, it was only to scold him for being slow. "Move faster, rookie," one shouted. "Watch it with that tray," another barked. He nodded politely and continued, silent and focused. Then came the night of the restaurant's biggest event, a VIP dinner with food critics, journalists, and a live audience. The kitchen was on edge, mistakes would be disastrous. Suddenly, a small fire broke out on the stovetop. Panic spread instantly. Without hesitation, the dishwasher sprang into action, extinguishing the flames with precision and directing the staff calmly. In mere minutes, the kitchen was back on track, running seamlessly as if nothing had happened. The head chef turned toward him, astonished. "Who are you?" With a calm smile, he removed his apron. "I'm the owner," he revealed. The same man they had mocked and underestimated all week had saved the night, and the restaurant's reputation. From that day forward, the staff learned a powerful lesson: never judge someone by their role, because true leadership can come from anywhere. The train rattled along the tracks, crowded with tired commuters. A quiet man sat near the window, reading a small notebook. His clothes were simple, his demeanor calm, nobody paid him any attention. Most passengers assumed he was just another regular traveler, blending into the background. Halfway through the ride, the conductor noticed a disturbance. A heated argument had broken out over a misplaced ticket, and tempers flared. People argued loudly, frustrated with the delay. The quiet man didn't react. He simply observed, jotting notes in his notebook. Minutes later, the situation escalated. Passengers argued over seating, and a young woman nearly missed her stop because of the chaos. Then the quiet man stood up. Calm and authoritative, he addressed the crowd, "Please step aside and allow everyone to board safely. This will prevent accidents." Everyone froze. His presence commanded respect, and the train quickly settled down. The conductor, still in shock, asked for his identification. With a polite smile, the man handed over his credentials. He was the chairman of the railway company. The same commuters who had ignored him minutes ago now stared in disbelief. That day, they learned a powerful lesson: appearances can be deceiving, and true authority doesn't always wear a suit.